The opposition victory in Hungarian elections will change the balance of power in Europe. The outgoing Prime Minister Viktor Orbán has been the standard-bearer for the Eurosceptic and Trump-aligned political forces. To discuss what his exit means for the European MAGA movement, I'm joined by Ivana Stradner, research fellow at Washington-based Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Ivana, welcome and great to have you with us again.
Thank you, always pleasure.
So, US Vice President Vance, Italian Prime Minister Meloni, Polish President Karol Nawrocki, French President hopeful Marine Le Pen, they were all prominent figures of the right rushing to Budapest to endorse Viktor Orbán, only to see him badly beaten in a high turnout election. What does this tell us about the state of the MAGA movement in Europe?
So to begin with, you're absolutely right that there are so many conservatives who are very optimistic about Orbán. But the real question is why and how Orbán managed to appeal to them. Orbán understood very well, since he came to power, that guiding his policies under the guise of being a traditional politician, portraying traditional moral and spiritual values, talking that he's a conservative, fighting the Western woke ideology, and reportedly, as he loves to portray himself as someone who is defender of borders in Europe. But this is all a myth. Orbán is not a conservative. He has always been just an opportunistic leader who understands how politics operate. So, for example, we have to also remind all those conservatives that didn't actually lose an ally, because Orbán is not also someone who has been protecting Europe coming from migrants, because those people, they didn't want to stay in Hungary. They wanted to go to much richer nations. Second thing, as Orbán has been talking that he is a pillar of protecting traditional values and Christianity, all you have to do is just to look at the polls and to see that how many people attend the church in Hungary. Very, very few. So he understands very well how to manipulate the right movement. But here is also a caveat, and something that I think many people in Washington, D.C., especially in the White House, should understand. With friends like Orbán, the Trump administration doesn't need enemies. Not only that Orbán has been very damaging when it comes to his ties to Russia, but also his ties to China as well as with Iran. So he portrayed himself as a pillar of Belt and Road Initiative, allowed China to have a foothold in Europe. And what happened when President Trump started his actions against Iran, Orbán was very critical of it. And there are numerous reports actually how Orbán has been working also closely with Iran. So that tells you really all you need to know, how those people on the right were manipulated by Orbán.
So what happens next? J.D. Vance, the US Vice President, already congratulated the incoming Prime Minister, Peter Magyar, and he also seemed to indicate that, well, we are basically ready for Orbán's defeat. But I guess it must have come as a surprise to the US administration.
I'm sure it did, because nowadays, all of us who have been following Hungary, I have to admit, even for all of us, it came as a surprise, given that Orbán has been completely controlling the information space, media, completely had a state capture. So it was really not easy to have this incredible vote out there. But Hungary is an important...
So how are they going to play it now with the new government? I mean, the US.
So that's the thing. Hungary is extremely important for also the United States, given that it's inside NATO. So Peter Magyar was very also, he's coming basically from the same political party, so he also shares numerous values with this administration. So in politics, you work with someone who is in power, not with someone who you wish that it is in power. So the United States will have to find ways to work with the new government, and I have no doubt that that's going to happen. So I think it's really too early to have all those gloom and doom scenario, how this is the end of Hungary-US relations. My concern is that we are not done with Orbán.
All right, but it seems a major role in this whole saga was played by a handful of journalists who, despite government pressure, despite the state capture and media control, managed to expose some of the things you mentioned, the facade and corruption and also the links to Russia. So do they take credit for this result?
This is an incredible result, and that's exactly what I'm saying, that it was not easy to do that. But this also really exposed the weakness coming from the Kremlin and from Orbán. So this gives a lot of hope, also in neighboring countries such as Serbia or Slovakia, or what's happening in Georgia, to a lot of people who are also fighting authoritarian regimes. So having said that, you're absolutely right that this result in Hungary is really, really huge and very important for democracy in Europe. And that's also something that here in the United States, you only see bad news, but there are many people who are cheering for Hungary and who are very happy what's happening.
Right. So going back to our original question, what message did this election deliver to the European Eurosceptic right, if you will?
It says, the democracy, in the end of the day, always win, and they should not cry for Orbán, because electorate really matters. And living, under such suppressive government such as Orbán just exposed, its own vulnerabilities. And finally, all of us, who have been warning about Russian influence for a very long time, Putin has lost another ally, which really shows that Russia is a paper tiger.
Right, but in terms of the sort of electoral future of Europe, has the MAGA movement in Europe hit a ceiling in Hungary, or this is just voters being tired with the mismanagement of the economy and so on and so forth?
I don't know if that was only linked, to MAGA movement and to the right. I think it's more also the question of corruption inside Hungary and the question of state capture, media control. Because even Magyar, he shares a lot of ideological stance like Orbán, but he also took the lead when it comes to fighting corruption and protecting democracy inside the country, but also protecting European values, which are significantly above all those other ideological things.
Ivana, thank you very much for your insight.
Always pleasure. Thank you.
And that's all we have for you now, but stay on for Anatomy of Disinformation, where Maja Mazurkiewicz will discuss how anti-EU narratives are generated in Europe and the United States. Thank you for watching.